Hello everybody, I'm Thomas and welcome back to another video. This time I am back with my yearly ranking video where each year I do 3 separate videos, one for ranking RPGs I've played, one for board games I've played, and one for solitaire card games I have played. Now, the past 2 years, I've used a site called PubMeeple, which is pretty great and does head-to-head comparisons and gives you an outputted list. But this year, I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to be doing a tier list. If you're not familiar with tier lists, they're pretty self-explanatory. You have different tiers with different rankings, S being the best, then A, B, C, and D followed. And I'm just going to be putting these games that I've played on the channel for the most part. There's a few in here I haven't played on the channel, and you might see why, because I might rank them pretty low, and get to see where they lie, where I think the best is, and where games that just really didn't click with me lie. So I have 25 games here on this list that I'm going to be ranking. I say games because some of them are games, some of them are not really games, some of them are just definitely not games, but they're RPG stuff, and I figured they all kind of belong in this list. So without further ado, let's get going. So I have these 25 games in alphabetical order, so I'm just gonna be going through them one by one, starting with 2D6 Dungeon, which there's a couple of these dungeon crawling type games in here that aren't really RPGs, but I figured they fit better in this video than, I don't know, with the board game video. And 2D6 Dungeon is my favorite of the ones I've played. I really like the combat system. I really like the map drawing system. Sometimes I wish there was a little bit more to it with like class options and maybe items, but I think as far as, like I said, like a kind of dungeon crawling game goes, this is by far my favorite. I think this easily belongs in A tier. I should also say I might, as I go, adjust things along the way, and then at the end maybe do a final adjustment just based on vibes and how I feel. But I think 2D6 Dungeon could go in S tier. I think there's a little bit missing for it to go in S tier, and I know there's a lot of expansions that have come out. I haven't played 2D6 Realms yet, but that's what I think. 6x6 Tales is a pretty basic RPG. There's really not much to it. It is a 2 pieces of paper, one for the map and like items, one for like events. I haven't played this in a while. I thought it was a cool concept, but I really didn't. I haven't played it since. I'm gonna put this in D tier. I think it was fine, but the decision space was pretty small. It was more of like a novelty, like print and play type RPG. Broken Cask, I think, is a very cool concept of an RPG where you get to run a tavern. Very unique. One thing that might come across is like, some of these games I like just because they do interesting things and they have interesting themes. You know, no other RPG on this list do you get to just run a tavern. I think it's very cool, and I think Broken Cask belongs in A tier. It's not the most in-depth, but I think there's a lot to do with like the whatever it is, the reputation system. You get to hire new crew or employees, and I think it's a very fun, very charming, and one I enjoy quite a lot. I should also say with this list, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but I am going to be also ranking these from left to right, best to worst. So like right now, I do think 2D6 Dungeon is better than Broken Cask. Okay, moving right along to Colossal, a very unique themed game where you're in this giant castle, different rooms or different like lands, and it's used, I don't think there's any dice used, it's just a deck of cards. I'm gonna put this in, it almost feels appropriate in C tier, but I'm gonna put it in B tier. I think it's a really cool concept. I love the art for it. The decision space isn't, you know, crazy. It's almost more of a journaling game, I would say, which I don't dislike journaling games, but they're not my forte. But I think just because of its unique theme and just that it uses a deck of cards, which is pretty unique, it's one that I enjoy playing, but I haven't really come back to that often. So I think B tier, maybe I could see it in C tier. We'll see. Like I said, I might adjust these as I go. D100 Dungeon. It's one I haven't played on the channel, and there's a reason. It's one of the first RPGs I've played. It's one of those dungeon crawling, not really an RPG, I would say, but it's kind of in that category. I'm gonna put this in C tier. This is one that I just really didn't vibe with. I definitely prefer actual RPGs over these like kind of dungeon crawling style RPGs. But of the ones I've played, D100 Dungeon was definitely my least favorite. It's the reason I haven't played on the channel, because I really didn't click with it that well. I really felt like the decision space was so lacking, especially in combat. That was the one thing, like, I think 2D6 Dungeon really sets apart itself, amongst other things. But like, I thought the combat in 2d6 Dungeon is really interesting with the maneuvers and the shifting and the combat fatigue. Like, it's very cool compared to D100 Dungeon, which I haven't played in a while, but I remember just feeling very lackluster about it. And this is D100 Dungeon is another one that has lots of expansions for it. I do really enjoy, I think it's like D100 World has some really nice like hex crawling, hex building stuff that I've used in like other RPGs. I think when I played Ironsworn, I used like the D100 World like hex stuff. So that stuff's cool, but yeah, overall I wasn't too impressed with it. Next up is Derelict Delvers, another kind of dungeon crawling style RPG, but we were in space going through and going to different spaceships and whatnot. I'm gonna put this in C tier, I guess. Maybe B tier. I like it as a concept. There's not too much there, but it's cool because it lets you kind of be very creative with your player powers, which I think is really neat. It has some interesting like clock systems that you like roll against, which I think is pretty cool. So it has a lot of neat stuff going on. I'm gonna put it in B tier actually. I feel like it's definitely better than D100 Dungeon, or maybe I need to move that down. Yeah, I think it's a neat concept. There's not too much to it, but I like the art style. I like the concept. It's fun to play. I think this would be a fun thing to like do as like a one shot just with some friends. You know, you want to like play a kind of an RPG as like a space dungeon crawling thing. Like, it's pretty cool. Moving right along to Dragonbane. This might be a bit controversial. I think Dragonbane's gonna go in B tier. I would say a B tier. I'll put it above these two though. Come on, okay, these are a little hard to move around. Okay, I put it at the top of B tier. You're gonna see this with a couple other games that might be a little bit controversial, but I have really kind of grown away from just a flat 2d20 system. I do think Dragonbane has some neat stuff going on. I like the different race, the kin options or whatever. Like the fact they can play as a mallard is pretty awesome. I liked that it's like a classless system, right? So you get to, it's pretty neutral and you get to like take different upgrades and whatnot. There's a lot to like with it, but, and I stand by that. I think if someone wanted to like try D&D, I think this would be a good thing to try instead. That's a lot lighter than D&D, but it's still like a D20 system and it's a fantasy world. And maybe it's not as like high magic as D&D, but I think this would be something that would be for like a good fantasy one-shot type thing. I'm glad I tried it. I really like Free League, but I've just really cooled on just normal flat D20 systems. Next is Dreams and Machines, which I've played once. I got an RPG quick start guide at like Gen Con, or I think it was Gen Con. This is Modifius game. I'm gonna put this in C tier. I liked the concept when I read through it. You know, admittedly, I've only played the quick start, which is free. I haven't actually played like the official game. But I wasn't too blown away by the quick start guide. I thought the lore was pretty cool. The world was interesting. But I don't know, there wasn't enough there that really wanted me to actually try the game fully. Plus there's just so many other RPGs out there I want to try. So maybe it's something I'll come back to at some point. But yeah, I'm going to say right now that that's going to go in C tier. Dungeons and Dragons. This is going to be a bit of a controversial maybe. I'm thinking B tier, maybe C tier. I think if I were to rate the game as a whole, probably low B, but just because I've played it so much and had a lot of good times with it, I'd maybe place it like here below Dragonbane. But I've played it a ton. It was the RPG that got me into RPGs. I've played it more than any other RPGs by far. But it doesn't work great for solo, which is how I've been playing a lot recently. And I don't know, like I said, I've really just been cooling on a flat like D20 system. So this is specifically 5th edition, I should mention, but I'm gonna put it in B tier. I think that's kind of where that goes. Escape the City, not really an RPG. This is one of those not really an RPGs. It's more of like a module to play 5th edition, I think Cairn, I don't know how you pronounce it. I'm gonna put this in A tier, B tier. I'm gonna put it in B tier. Once again, it's kind of a weird one because it's not really an RPG, but I thought it was a really cool concept. I liked that it was like a self-contained thing that, like I said, you know, it's tough to play D&D like solo, but this gives you a framework for it. And I think it worked really well the few times I've played it solo. I've also played this co-op with some people once or twice and thought it was quite fun. So once again, not an RPG itself, it's more of like a module, a framework, but I'm gonna put it there. Fallout 2D20, S tier, easily one of my favorite RPGs I have played. I really enjoy the Fallout franchise. And then that was what initially drew me into this, and I was blown away with the game. Really, there was a lot I liked with it, with the perks, with just the two. This is my first time trying out a 2D20 system, and I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I've been really cooling on the D20 system, and one thing that kind of helps me realize that is trying out a 2D20 system, or where you're rolling multiple D20s, because it feels better, not just relying on one dice. And it is a bit weird that it's like a roll under system, but in a lot of ways it works really well with like, okay, I have this as my attribute and this as my skill. My target number is 10. I'm rolling 2d20. I need to get a number of successes. A crit is 2 successes. You have these complications. It all works really well, I think. There's a lot to the game. There's now plenty of expansions and modules for it. NPC packs, lots of stuff that I haven't played with. I've been meaning to try, like the was it the Wastelands guide or the Survivalist guide? One of them that adds like settlement stuff, and I really want to get into that. One thing I love about Fallout that I've realized I really like about RPGs is having some sort of scavenging and crafting, and this does have that, where you can go scavenging, and then you can use workbenches to build items or to add modifications to your weapons. And I just really enjoy that stuff in RPGs, and I really wish more tabletop RPGs would do that. I think Fallout did it really well. It's got tons of items. If you're a Fallout fan, I highly recommend trying it. It's definitely one of my favorite RPGs I've played. Speaking of one of my favorite RPGs I played, next up is Forbidden Lands by Free League, and this is it goes above Fallout. Awesome. It's just great. It's so fun. So it's a fantasy post-apocalyptic kind of, which is, Fallout is like a post-apocalyptic, but this is like a fantasy post-apocalyptic, which I think is still very interesting. Very deadly combat, as I've come to learn, but has lots of stuff I like. It has different classes, and it has interesting ways that you can like level up. I like that you don't get just XP from killing stuff, but you get it from doing a bunch of other stuff, traveling around and using certain things. It's been a while since I've played Forbidden Lands at this point, but it's one that I really enjoy. It has crafting. Every single item in the game you can craft, and I just love that. It's awesome. It has a cool stronghold aspect where you can make a base, upgrade it, you can hire hirelings, and there's stuff in the rules for all this. It's not like it's homebrew and you have to add on top of it. It also has a module for solo support. Fallout, while I do enjoy it, doesn't have solo support by default. I use Mythic with it, but Forbidden Lands has solo right out the box, and I think it's great. Forbidden Lands also has a really interesting dice rolling system where you're just rolling a bunch of d6 and trying to get a number of successes, and then there's like a concept of like re-rolling, and then you have a bane, then you got to keep the banes, and the banes hurt your stats, and you don't really have health points, but you can have like a strength stat that gets weakened as you go on. I think there's so much to like about Forbidden Lands. It's one of my favorites by far of an RPG I've played. I think it's so fun, does so many things right. And it's one that I definitely want to keep coming back to. The combat's pretty solid. You have it's pretty simple. You just have a fast action and a slow action, and I like that you can like dodge and parry on your turn, but that means you have to save your fast action. It's like all this, it's not too complicated, but then there's also advanced combat rules, and there's campaign books for it. So Forbidden Lands is one that I thoroughly enjoy, and right now it belongs at the top of my list in the S tier. Forge. It's the fantasy open role-playing game engine. This is one that I played fairly recently. It is, from my understanding, I could be speaking out of my butt here, but it's an OSR style game, so an old school Renaissance, I think that's what that stands for, style, like a B/X game. Once again, I could be completely wrong, but I think that's right in saying that. It's my first foray into those older style RPGs. And there's a lot I enjoyed with it. I really enjoyed, I think first off, it was free. I liked the art style in it. It had solo rules right out the box. It had stuff for hex crawling and a bunch of other just like, not just combat rules, but ultimately it didn't really stick with me. I think I would put it in B tier, maybe like right here. Yeah, I think that's probably, I'll maybe put it below Colossal. It's one that I enjoyed. I think if you enjoy those older style RPGs, it's definitely one to give a shot to. It was the first one I tried, and I really think maybe these are just not for me. Everybody likes different things in RPGs, and I think that's just how it goes sometimes. War Against Darkness, C tier. I'd put it above both of these. I'd put it at the top of C tier. I don't think it goes up much more above that. It's a good game. It's not really an RPG. I would say it's not an RPG. It's one of those games that has a ton of modules and expansions for it that you can add with, but it's just one there's not too much to it. The combat's pretty simple. It's cool that you get to like, draw a map as you go, and I don't know. I think if someone wanted to get into solo RPGs, it's not a bad place to start, because it's not really an RPG, but it gets you in the mind space of like playing alone and rolling dice and drawing up stuff, and it's pretty self-contained. And I think that's good if someone wanted to start out. War Against Darkness might actually be one of my recommendations, but it's not one that I think really has a lot of legs to keep going with. I did buy like the Towns expansion, but I never really got around to playing it because it just, I don't know. I don't know if it was going to fix the issues I had with the game. And I do like it more than D100 Dungeon, but of like the dungeon crawling games, it's not one of my favorites. Next up is GURPS. GURPS I played pretty recently, and I'm still pretty new to it. I only played with the basic. I actually pretty much only played with GURPS Lite, and I just used a couple of like the, whatever they like, advantages and disadvantages from the basic set. But it was one I enjoyed. There was a lot I liked about it. There was a good amount I didn't like about it. I think I also used, at least the playthrough I did on the channel was also a very weird playthrough. Admittedly, it wasn't a very normal playthrough where I was essentially playing it to make Phineas and Ferb episodes. I was playing as Dr. Doofenshmirtz, and I kind of had an outline, so like it was pretty formulaic, but I also really enjoyed that like playthrough. I thought it was very interesting trying to use that, GURPS and Mythic, to kind of make episodes of a TV show where you kind of have a general outline but help filling in the gaps. I thought it was really fun, but it was a very different playthrough than my normal playthroughs. But I also did like a more normal playthrough off stream with it. I think there's a lot to like about it. I like the character building system a lot. I think that was my favorite thing about how you have a certain amount of points, and then you get more points from taking disadvantages, and they can get these advantages. And from what I've seen, like this really truly it's a generic. GURPS stands for Generic Universal Role-Playing System, and I could see how I played it for a cartoon, kids cartoon, Phineas and Ferb, but how you could also use it for playing Western or fantasy or cyberpunk. Like I could see how it could really be used to play any of those and probably do it really well. There's tons of expansions for this. But when it came to the actual gameplay, I wasn't too impressed. I think the character building was my favorite, but when it came to the actual playing, I wasn't too blown away. I liked that it used, I think it was 3d6, right? And it was a roll under system. I liked that concept a lot, but I don't know. Overall playing it, I wasn't too impressed. I'm going to put it in B tier, maybe below D&D. I thought it was interesting. It's one I might come back to, but I wasn't too blown away by. Next up is Intergalactic Space Trader by Toby Lancaster, who also made 2D6 Dungeon. This game might be familiar with you because I've talked about it quite a lot on the channel. I've played it a few times, and I've also made a website called iStow for it. That's iStow.xyz if you want to check it out. And it's a game I greatly enjoy. It's very unique. Once again, it's not, I wouldn't really call it an RPG, but I feel like it fits better in this tier list than the other ones I'm gonna do, where you're just playing as a space trader, going around making money, going to different planets, all that good stuff. I would say, does this go in S tier? It's either high A or S tier. I'm debating. I'm gonna put it in high A tier. because while it's a great game and I've spent a ton of time playing it, and hopefully there's going to be more content coming in the future, I think that will make it more to do in it. It's fairly basic, but I really like it because it fills once again a gap of like an RPG that I've never seen another RPG do, where you're like just playing as a space trader going around. It's more of an economy RPG. You can invest in investments on planets, and you buy stuff here and sell it there, and maybe you're going to try to smuggle illegal goods through there, and you can slowly upgrade your ship. And it's really, really unique, very, very fun, and one I greatly enjoy, and I'm glad I came across. So I would say once again, I might adjust these as I go or at the end, but I'm gonna say right now high A tier. Next up is Ironsworn by Sean Tompkin. I really enjoyed this game, but I wasn't too blown away by it, if I'm being honest. I think I'm gonna place it and then talk about it. I'm gonna put it maybe here below D&D and Dragonbane. I think it belongs in B tier. I think it's a great game, especially it's free from what I'm remembering. There's a lot I like about Ironsworn, and you know, I feel like Starforged is right behind it, so I'm gonna play Starforged and then kind of talk about both of them. Starforged, I think, goes at the top of S tier. I really think it does, especially because I've been playing it more recently. It's just so good. Now that might be kind of strange that Starforged at the moment, according to this tier list, is my favorite RPG I've played, and I would say that's probably true. So why is Ironforge so low? There's a lot I like about Starforged that Ironsworn doesn't quite do. First off, the rules are a little bit different. I haven't played Ironsworn to like off the top of my head recite what's different, but I know the combat works pretty differently. Also, how you kind of do like vows, I think, is a little bit different. I just also really like sci-fi settings. I'm a sci-fi guy. I'm a bit of a nerd. Who would have guessed? And while I do like the kind of dark fantasy setting that Ironsworn provides, I don't know. I wasn't too blown away by it, but I really like the concepts and that they just refined and made into Starforged so much that I think Starforged top of S tier. Ironsworn still a solid game. I think it goes in B tier. I think some stuff I also really like in Starforged is that I like that you build out the sector map, and then it gives you more stuff for settlements and locations. And I feel like Ironsworn, maybe it has a map, but it doesn't really give you much details about it. And I don't know how it's been a while since I played Ironsworn, like how much it has as far as like giving you info on settlements. So, well, Ironsworn is a great game. Starforged is my favorite at the moment. Yeah, it just felt a little lacking, but I still think it's solid. It's definitely a good game, and I think B tier kind of represents that. Speaking of Ironsworn and Starforged, Iron Valley, created by the one and only M. Curran. I think this is a fantastic game. This is a fan-made game off of the Ironsworn and Starforged systems that uses like the action and challenge dice, and takes place in the Iron Valley, which is kind of a Stardew Valley Animal Crossing style game. I will put this in high A tier. I'll maybe put it below IST. I think Iron Valley once again fits a kind of niche that no other game on my list is really there for. It's just, there's no combat in it at all. It's just cozy, charming, just getting to mingle with the townsfolk and talk to them. And I don't know, it's great. It's free. I really like the artwork in it. There's more apparently coming here soon. I think Iron Valley Adventures is something around the corner, so who knows what's going to happen with that. But I think it's just, I really like the Ironsworn and Starforged like system of dice rolling with the moves and whatnot. And I think Iron Valley just does a great job at taking that and putting it in like a totally different environment. Iron Valley has great tables, like specifically, I know it has a great weather table that I use in a lot of other games. And I think it belongs in A tier. So there you go. Lemuria Space Station is a very interesting game where you play as like a robot bounty hunter. I'm gonna put this in C tier. I quite liked it, but there was, it's been a while since I played this. There was a lot that, not a lot, but there was a few things I had issues with the gameplay loop of it. It was fairly simplistic, where you just kind of go to a bounty board, you see what robots are available to hunt, you go do some things to hunt for the robots, you get some credits, you get to buy new items. The art was amazing. I really liked the art in it, and the concept as a whole was really neat, but once again, it's been a while since I played it, so I can't maybe properly articulate why I'm putting it in C tier, but I just remember not being too blown away and having a fair amount of issues with some of like the actual gameplay itself. I still think it was a fun game, but it hasn't been one I returned to since last time I played it. Next up is Mythic Game Master Emulator 2nd Edition. One of the things on this list that's not, this isn't an RPG at all. It's S tier for sure. I'm gonna put it at the end of S tier because it's, once again, it's not, I mean, what do I mean, do I put it at the top? Like that feels kind of weird, but maybe because I wouldn't, have played Fallout without it, and I like using it wherever I can. I think it's phenomenal. It's so good. You could kind of just take bits and pieces of it. I just love the idea of the yes/no oracle with the chaos factor. I think is such just a genius idea, and that you can have random events and the character list and the threads list and the scenes. Mythic is, I remember when I first got into solo RPGs, I started with D100 Dungeon, wasn't too blown away, and then the very next thing I bought was Mythic 1st Edition at the time. I played it with D&D because that's the only RPG I knew, and that was what really got me into RPGs. I was like, wow, Mythic was what really kind of opened my eyes, and I'm still learning about how to play good with Mythic and how to properly use it. But at this point, pretty much almost any RPG that I can incorporate it with, I do at least in some capacity, because I think Mythic is just phenomenal, and I think belongs in S tier, even though once again it's not really an RPG, even though there is a Mythic RPG, but I'm just specifically in this case talking about Mythic Game Master Emulator 2nd Edition. So there you go. Nexalis, a very interesting game where you play as, what do they call them? I forget, just different kind of heroes, and you're in this interesting world where there's different islands and there's like this space sea between them. It's a high fantasy, I think it's a D20 system. It's been a while since I've played it, so sorry if my descriptions aren't all that accurate. I'm gonna put this in, I think it's a B tier game. I'm gonna maybe put it above Colossal, but below GURPS. I think that's probably pretty fair. I'm pretty sure it's a D20 system game, so that's why it's not. If it was like not, it might be a bit higher, and maybe I need to readjust this if I'm wrong. But I really liked it. Oh, it was the playbooks is what they called it. And one thing that I liked about it is that even though you could play as different classes, the different playbooks, there was still a lot of flexibility on like what skills you take. You have these legendary items you could take. It gave you a nice structure for an adventure, and then you go off and go to another island and then do another adventure there. Maybe I'm even gonna put it a little bit higher. Maybe this is controversial. I might put it a little bit higher. Something like that. I think it was very fun. I'm gonna maybe mispronounce the name. Caesar Capical? I'm so sorry. Caesar made this game as well as Derelict Delvers. I think the only two of their games that I've played on this list. Did they also make Escape the City? They might have, I forget. But regardless, they've made both of these games. I know Nexalis and Derelict Delvers. So they make a lot of other RPGs of the two I've played of theirs. And yeah, I think it's super solid. I think it's another game that is fun to play solo, but I also think would make a great kind of, if you want to play like a light, whimsical fantasy one shot with some friends, even lighter than Dragonbane, Nexalis would be the way, is my opinion. Organic Towns, a game I haven't played in a while. Very interesting, where it's once again kind of an RPG, not really an RPG, but because you don't play as a character, you're kind of taking an overview of building out some towns. I will rate this A tier. I really like this as a concept. I think maybe I'll even rate it like right there. Very interesting game. I like it a lot. one I want to come back to, because you can either start as a town fresh, or you can just plug in your own town and then kind of build it up from there to make it feel more organic. Who would have guessed? Okay, I didn't realize how long I've been yapping. This video is getting long. So next is Pathfinder. This is specifically 2nd edition revised. I haven't played this on the channel, and that's because I haven't been too crazy about it. I think I would maybe put it above D&D, but just slightly. But like, I've had more fun times playing D&D, and Pathfinder I'm new to, but I think as a game, Pathfinder might be a little bit better just with its action point system and how some other things work with it. But I don't know. I still haven't played enough to really make a definitive, I don't know, a definitive answer, but that's what I think, just kind of off the dome. And the last one is Space Aces, a nice, light, whimsical sci-fi game, easily A tier. I'll maybe put it above Organic Towns. Very fun. Once again, I'm going to use this as another example of, like, I think if you want to play a nice, fun, lighthearted, like sci-fi one-shot, or just play this for solo, I think this is the way to go for a nice, fun sci-fi game. Pretty light, just uses a D6, I believe, and maybe a D20. Gives off, like, yeah, you can kind of lean into a lot of the, you know, like a Star Trek vibe or whatever. But one thing I really, really like about Space Aces is it has some phenomenal tables. I really, really like some of the tables that it gives you to use, and I actually find myself pulling these tables all the time for the character creators. They have like these gadget creators, the like mech, they have like all these, like the creature creators. It has so many great tables that even if you don't play the game itself that much, I think its tables are absolutely worth it. And it's got great art, and it's just a phenomenal game. So there you go. This is my tier list of RPGs I have played on my channel, mostly. A few others I haven't. And I think this pretty accurately represents what I feel with all these games. I think I can make some minor adjustments here and there, but I feel pretty happy with this list, and this video has been going on longer than I wanted. So I'm gonna wrap up here. Let me know what you think. Were there any things that stand out as shocking to you? Would you, what would your S tier games be? Let me know in the comments what your S tier games would be out of maybe these, or maybe not out of these. Let me know, because I know there's tons of RPGs out there, and I have a huge list of ones that I want to get to at some point. But I think this was a fun way to do this, because while Pub Meeple gives you a list, you know, it doesn't really tell you, okay, if my game is at number 4 versus number 5, like it gives you some idea of like where those games are at, but not really how good those games are. But I feel like this is a bit of better representation with the different tiers, showing you where I think different games lie. And as you see, I mean, I think most games pretty solid. Some aren't great, some are really good, and some are just top of the top, baby. S tier stuff right there. So there you go. That's all I got for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna be doing 2 more of these videos. I think the next one I'll be doing is for solitaire card games I've played, and then the final one will be, of course, board games I've played. So be on the lookout for those. Let me know what you think of this new style tier list videos and what games you would put in S tier. And until next time, I'll see you.